In this video, I'm going to be talking about some of Trujillo's views, anti-Haitianism, and how this relates to the history between Haitians and Dominicans on the island. It's important to make clear that this segment is not about promoting racial bias, but to help to educate people on the topic, including Dominicans in the diaspora. In regards to the conflict between Haitians and Dominicans and the border problem, the issue arises when much of the complex relations in history are overshadowed by politics and ideas of victimhood. Usually putting Dominicans in a historical negative and not revealing that there are historical negatives on both sides. Every country has immigration laws and rules that are meant to be followed, the same as the DR's immigration laws should be. Now, the focus on this video is not going to be centered on the immigration laws and how that relates to Haitians. The primary focus is going to be on the views of Trujillo and a summary of the relations between Haitians and Dominicans. Notions of anti-Haitianism is usually presented very vaguely. And that usually starts with the views of Trujillo, the Parsley Massacre, and the attempts to trace back anti-Haitianism to the early days of Dominican independence. So it's important to make it understandable. We have to look at each of these parts separately because when it comes to this, everything gets meshed into one label, anti-Haitianism, for example, and that doesn't help to explain the conflict on the island, which is much more complex than just using one label. So we are going to tackle this topic in a responsible manner, view this with an open mind, share your opinions and comments, and let's discuss this topic in a responsible manner. So now we're going to discuss some of Trujillo's views. Okay, so the basis of anti-Haitianism. The basis of this is the militarism implemented under Trujillo, which is also coined anti-democratic, because Trujilloism did not conform to a rational or sociological analysis. Now, Trujillo's views often gets mixed up with the nationalist views. So essentially the nationalist views are the Dominicans wanting to become separate and independent from Haiti due to history of mismanagement and corruption. And this often gets mixed up with Trujillo's extreme views. Nationalists began to establish an identity, an independent identity, because Haitian occupation was oppressive to Spanish speakers in the DR. This gave rise to Dominican nationalism and declaration of Dominican independence from Haiti. So the base of anti-Haitianism, the idea is that Dominicans are xenophobic towards Haitians. Now we look at the history of both nations on the island. we can see example that, Haitians had similar views toward Dominicans. And examples of this we have is during the 22-year occupation, and then after the attempted invasions to the DR by Haiti. So Trujillo's views were mostly Eurocentric. When we look at it today, especially in terms of science, Trujillo was wrong in a lot of areas. There was an assumption that Dominicans are a society of integrated blacks and mulattoes, where the Aboriginal race, as a consequence of the political extermination of Spanish colonizations, had left no traces. Now we know through studies that Dominicans on the island, two references, genetic diversity in the Dominican Republic and Taino and African maternal heritage in the Greater Antilles, that Dominicans on the island are native descendants. In the article, which both are found on ResearchGate, genetic diversity in the Dominican Republic, the native haplogroups are only found on the eastern side of the island. The exaltation of Hispanic values was an inheritance collected with all fidelity by the ideological system of Trujillo. Trujillo tried to extenuate an overextension of his Spanish ancestry. It's important to make clear in regards to Dominicans / Quisqueyanos, part of our ancestry comes from Europe. As we emerge as a new group on the island due to the European and the African admixing with the native population on the island, and this gave rise to the Dominican people. Trujillo's ideas of defining Hispanic culture, they weren't grounded because his views did not reflect our multiculturalism. The militarized concept of Hispanidad by Trujillo was ungrounded. During this time of the Trujillo era, the Haitian population was generally considered blacker than that of the Dominican Republic. Now we know that Dominicans in the DR are diverse. This is why I stated in the first video that we have to look beyond skin color. And all of these views during that time was before the emergence of major DNA testing. Trujillo's ideas of Hispanidad also gets crossed with the history of between Dominicans and Haitians, which I'm going to discuss in the second part. The exaltation of Hispanic culture and everything Spanish and the formation of the Dominican nation. Today we know that this is untrue. Such ideals within Trujilloism was a misrepresentation of the country's diverse history. So Trujillo addresses the country of being overrun by influx of Haitian migrants, and as a result, his handling of it has put the DR and the Dominican people in a negative light. So now I'm going to reference some historical events that will help people to understand why Dominicans on the island will have poor sentiment and resentment towards Haitians in Haiti. The beginning of this would be with the massacre of Mocha and Santiago in 1805. 1801 through 1805, during this time, Haiti made looting and burning towns of Monte Plata, La Vega, San Francisco de Macorís, San Jose de Maras, and Monte Cristi. After Haiti declared independence from France in 1804, they treated their neighbor as if they were the French oppressors. During the 22-year occupation, 1822 through 1844, many Dominicans viewed this time as a brutal military regime. Examples of this: use of French language over Spanish during the occupation, the closing of churches and the state university, the rural code implemented under Boyer, heavy taxes imposed on Dominicans, the redistribution of land. After independence from Haiti, DR had to deal with attempted invasions by Haitian soldiers as an attempt to regain control of the territory. Some dates of examples of this conflict are 1801, 1805, 1844, 1845, 1853, 1855, and 1856. This difficult time for Dominicans created cultural conflicts, on top of the two nations having two separate demographic origins. And this will be the basis, in my opinion, of Dominicans developing resentment towards Haitians, as seen today with Dominican-Haitian relations on the island. Boyer pays an indemnity to France in order for Haiti to get recognition for its independence in 1838. This led to the desire of movements advocating for a separation. The positive of the Haitian occupation was the effective removal of colonial slavery. But then with the implementation of the rural code, which was pretty much a form of neo-slavery, many Dominicans would consider that their country has unfairly taken the brunt of the Haitian exodus and should not be responsible for the social economic burden. So now I'm going to give an example in regards to land, and then we're going to wrap this up. So this is coming from Frank Moyer-Bones. Under Boyer, his military commanders in the East to encourage the former slaves to grow coffee and foodstuff. At the same time, the inhabitants of the eastern part of the island were to be made aware of the property law in Haiti. Boyer understood that the Spanish property law and the system of land tenure in Santo Domingo was radically different from the French Haitian legislation that provided for absolute private ownership guaranteed by titles issued by the state. In the Spanish part of the island from the middle of the 16th century, the predominant system had been seen that of communal lands, commonly called terrenos comuneros. Under this system, land was simultaneously owned and used by multiple owners. The system originated as the island became depopulated in the 16th century on the western side. Then it was useless to divide the land for the purposes of inheritance, since at the time the Spanish population only numbered 7,000 people. For Haitians accustomed to the clear and systematic French legal system, the Spanish system of terrenos comuneros seemed confusing and backward. They saw it as an obstacle that should be removed at once in order to give land to those who needed it, particularly the recently emancipated slaves. The question to be resolved was which land to distribute. To the surprise of Boyer and his military commanders, it was not only the archbishop who refused to collaborate, but also the campesinos of Spanish origin. Now, let's keep in mind this reference doesn't add in due regard that we know today that the Dominican people make up of a triracial background, and that is of the European and the African admixing with the native people, and this gave rise to a new hybrid population on the island, according to DNA studies, the Dominican people. The Dominican campesinos were not sympathetic to the orders to cultivate cacao, sugarcane, and cotton. Rather, to engage in plantation agriculture, they preferred to pursue other economic activities that for several decades had proven more profitable because of the assurance of a foreign market. In the West, Haitian peasants also resisted the government's pressures to practice commercial agriculture. This was an unforeseen consequence of the Haitian policy of distributing lands after the revolution. So closing out, some points to consider. It's important to note that the DR has several holidays that observes independence from Haiti. We should always keep into consideration that the history of the two countries has examples of both good and bad. Example on the DR side, we have with Trujillo, and examples on the Haitian side, we have with the Duvaliers. It's important to be understanding how Dominicans on the island feel as far as to the history. Also, Dominicans in the diaspora should not be ignorant of their ethnic identity. It's important that we stir away from extreme views and we look at things objectively in a responsible manner. And we can always use examples of Duarte, Hostos, Betances, and Marti for ideas of democracy and how to move forward responsibly. So this is all for today. Let me know what you think. Let's be constructive in how we engage in this conversation. And until next time.